I enjoy the book of Revelation, for things to come. They call it the study of eschatology, or the doctrine of eschatology. It just simply means things to come. Dwight J. Pentecost years ago wrote a book, and he had a little different perspective than we as Independent Baptists had, and it was called Things to Come. A lot of people reference that on the book of Revelation. Been a lot of thought go into Revelation over the years, but I thank God that the book of Revelation is chronologically in order. Now, occasionally you have what's called a parenthetical. It's not that things are not happening on earth. They are, but he's giving an explanation in the middle. When you get chapter number 12, you're starting the second half of the tribulation period. The first half, he dealt with the world in general. Antichrist, the setting up of his kingdom. Boy, just a lot of things went on. God brought plagues. He brought all types of things upon this earth to get their attention. You get to the second half, for the first time you find Israel mentioned. Matter of fact, you find actually right at the end of chapter number 11 and then into chapter number 12, you find Jerusalem for the first time. Now, the reason being, the tribulation period is all about Israel. It's called Jacob's trouble. It's Daniel's 70th week. God set them aside after the crucifixion of Christ when they said, we will not have this man to reign over us. God then broke off that natural branch called Israel, and he began to graft in a wild olive branch, which was the church. It was Jew and Gentile together. And then at the end of the age, we find Revelation. Now we get chapter number 12. What are you doing? Everything's still rolling on earth, but he's given an explanation of some things that are eternal. If you look at the first 6 verses, we'll just read them again. There appeared a great wonder in heaven. Now, what we're going to see in these verses of Scripture is something that's in heaven before it ever gets to earth. A woman clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. That's the nation of Israel. In the mind of God, before the foundations were ever laid, God had a people in mind by the name of Israel to be his covenant people. So the woman is there. If you study, read after Roman Catholicism, they'll tell you it's the Virgin Mary. It's not the Virgin Mary. It is the nation of Israel. And so we find that. The second one we find is verse number 2, and she being with child, travailing in birth, and pain to be delivered. So the child is Christ. Christ was always in the mind and heart of God because he is God. The Bible said, from everlasting to everlasting thou art God, and that was Jehovah God, or Jesus Christ speaking. Jesus Christ was the Jehovah God of the Old Testament. And God became flesh. That Word became flesh. That Creator became flesh and dwelt among us. And we beheld his glory as of the glory of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. That was John 1, verse number 14. So we find what we call a parenthetical introduction to the second half. Now, I put in my notes, you've got a unique privilege tonight of seeing what takes place in heaven while we're already there. You need to understand all these things we're reading about. Listen, we're going to be home, folks. We're going to be there. We're going to be raptured out of here. We're going to be in heaven when the tribulation goes on, and I thank God for that tonight. So we're right in the middle of this up here. But we have the privilege right now of seeing something. One, we see eternity past. That was before Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God. That was the beginning of creation. That was not the beginning of God. It was not the beginning of who God was. God is something that you and I cannot understand tonight. He is an eternal being. He always has been. He always will be. He told Moses, I am that I am has sent you. That's in that present tense. So he did it for several things. One, that we might understand that God knew before the creation of everything what would happen to everything he created. Old Dr. B.R. Lakin years ago, he made that statement, has it ever occurred to you that nothing has ever occurred to God. God created the heavens and the earth, all of them is. He created them by himself, for himself, and through himself, and to himself. This is all about God. God owns this thing. God owns us tonight. God owns everything you see tonight belongs to God. He's the creator of it all. So we see that it's about God. Second thing, he wants us to understand that God is not reactionary. God is proactive. Now you say, what's reactionary? Well, the best way that I can put that forth to you is a chess game. How many like to play chess? All right, the best offense is what? Good defense. Sometimes you can set up a trap for people. If you've got fool's mates, I used to love to play a lot of chess. One of my roommates in college back in the 60s, Western Kentucky University, was in a chess club. Him and his girlfriend, who went to an Ivy League school up in New England, they played chess by letter. He kept a chessboard set up in the room. Can you imagine mailing your move to them moving, and you're talking about one move every week or so if the mail runs right, and you can't trust the mail. But what happened was, it got to where the chess game was, by the time we got out of college, they weren't halfway through. But at the same time, they're reactionary. They react to what something else is doing. God tonight is not reactionary. He's not sitting up there waiting on Satan to make his next move. God knows his next move. God knows his last move. So he is proactive in what he's doing. God has already taken care of you and I before this thing ever started. In his mind and his foreknowledge. So what happens is, he's showing us that God's on both sides of eternity. Eternity past, eternity future. I use the past and the future, but I want you to understand again tonight that with God, there is no past. God has no future. God has no time. Time is something that God set 7,000 years of it for mankind on this earth, and then we go back into the everlastingness of eternity. I guess that would be a good way to say it. The third thing, that we might understand that God completely controls everything that's going on. That's why I said about these elections that were back in November. We're going to vote our conscience. We're going to vote right. And we'll be all right in 2021, regardless of who's up there. Hey, how many of you doing all right? Hey, they hadn't got rid of us yet. Everybody said they're going to line us up against the wall and shoot all of us Christians, and they're going to do all of this. Hey, everything's going to be all right. God's in control, and that's what you cannot thwart his plans or destroy his work. His will is going to be done. The fourth thing, as we begin the second half, we see God's plan for Israel, for Christ, and for Satan from the beginning to the end. So what we're looking at now is we're looking from that period from the beginning. And by the way, I do not believe that the angels in heaven were created until after the creation of the earth. I believe they were created in that time frame back there. We'll find God dealing with them in the time frame at the end on the other side of this thing. But everything that God has created, listen, the redemption from man, wickedness of our adversary, all of this God knows about and understands. Now, we got three main, and I use the word players. If you look under C, I put that in parentheses. The reason being, I try to be careful about referring to Israel, Jesus Christ, being players. But God has set this thing up that's going to be dealing with three individual things. One, an individual nation. Two, Jesus Christ himself. And three, the one we're going to look at a little bit tonight, and that is Satan himself. So, in verse number 3, I want you to notice what he said. There appeared another wonder in heaven. Now, this is in heaven, not on earth. A lot of people have a strange conception tonight about Satan. They believe that Satan was kicked out of heaven back when he sinned. He has not been kicked out of heaven. You find him in the book of Job. He's in heaven. The sons of God came before Christ. Well, Satan came with them. You find in the New Testament that he is the accuser of the brethren, and he stands before God and accuses you and I day and night. So, does he walk to and fro? He does. He walks to and fro on the earth. But we find here in heaven, behold, and this is how God describes him, and I want to deal with him just for a few minutes tonight, a great red dragon, having 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads. We'll deal with that in the next chapters up here as we get in to the beast that comes out of the sea and the beast that comes out of the earth. We're going to deal with that. So I'm not going to get into that description tonight. Verse 4, his tail drew the 3rd part of the stars of heaven and did cast them to the earth. Now, by typology, we believe that these stars he's talking about are these messengers that were in heaven, that a 1/3 of the angels in heaven followed him in his rebellion. All through the New Testament especially, we find these devils. People, they call them demons. I had rather use a biblical terminology. The word demon is the underlying Greek word that you find devil off of. But I like what Dr. Seitler told us preacher boys years ago. He said, use biblical terminology. Use biblical terminology. It's not once saved, always saved. It's eternal life. It's everlasting life. He said you can't find once saved, always saved in the Bible, but everywhere you cut it, it bleeds eternal life, and you can show that. So what happens is, this red dragon. Now, look under D in your notes. It's important that we see once again that this vision takes place in heaven, not on earth, and in God's foreknowledge, he shows us that what he created in perfection changes into wickedness. It involves choices and not predestination. Now, I want to say about Satan tonight. God never predestined Satan to lead a rebellion in heaven. It was a personal choice. Angels cannot be redeemed, but you need to understand that they are free moral agents. By that, they can make choices. God gave them the choice to make choices. It said with his tail, he drew the 3rd part of the stars of heaven. We're going to find out when, just shortly, we're going to find war in heaven where he's cast out. But he said he did cast him to the earth, and the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered for to devour her child as soon as it was born. Now, I'm going to deal with that probably on next Sunday night. But I want to look just for a few minutes. The rest of your notes tonight has to do with that great red dragon. Now, we're not going to get deep into Satanology or angelology. One thing, I'm very careful when I deal with that. You got a lot of people, young people, they get on the internet and they start searching a little about witchcraft and things like that, and they do that out of curiosity. You get into a very dangerous ground. How many remember the Ouija boards of years ago? All right. That was made out of cardboard. But what it was, and the danger of it was, is that those that were playing that game opened their minds to something that is real out here, to a spiritual world that it is as wicked and ungodly as anything you've ever known in your life. So what they were doing, it wasn't just a cardboard, but it was them opening their minds and opening their hearts up to that. You know, when you go blank and open your mind, you become subject for somebody placing something in there. One of the dangerous things about the television set is people that watch it are mindless. They're not really thinking, they're just watching what goes on. So what happens is you get a lot of bad philosophy and things that come through that. So I want to look at Satan a few minutes. In Ezekiel 28:18, we find he was created with perfection. Thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day that thou wast created until iniquity was found in thee. Oh, what a beautiful angel this was, Satan, Lucifer, light bearer, son of the morning. We find that beautiful angel. We found that he was created in purity as with the rest in Matthew 25. Said, when the Son of Man shall come in his glory and all the angels with him, then shall he sit upon the throne of his glory. All right, these are holy angels. They were created in a state of absolute holiness. They were created in a state actually of innocence, just like man. Adam and Eve were not holy when they were created. They were actually innocent. They were like children, even though Adam, I believe, was probably the smartest man who ever walked on the face of this earth. He walked with God and with the voice of God. He named every animal on this earth. He was not some kind of a caveman that had a club and hit Eve over the head and grabbed her by the hair and drug her off in a cave someplace. They're very intelligent beings that God created. We find his beauty in Ezekiel 28:12. Son of man, take up a lamentation upon the king of Tyrus, and say unto him, Thus saith the Lord God, Thou sealest up the sum full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. What a glorious thing Satan was as a created being. Over in Ezekiel 28, he said this, Thou hast been in the Eden of the garden of God. Satan was in the garden of God. He was in Eden. Now, I understand that he was not the serpent. He used the serpent. Because God identified that serpent. It's what we have today that crawls upon the ground and eats the dust as long as he lives. But that serpent had to open itself up to a devil possession. And that was Satan that did it. But he walked in the garden of God. Every precious stone was thy covering. The sardis, topaz, the diamond, the beryl, the onyx, the jasper, the sapphire, and the emerald, and the carbuncle, and gold, and the workmanship of thy tabrets and of thy pipes were prepared in thee in the day that thou was created. We find also in here that he is an angel of music. There was something in his creation that had tabrets and pipes within his makeup, within his being from the day of his creation. It's interesting how Satan today uses music to get his job done. I'm not just talking about worldly, secular, hard rock or acid rock or punk rock or all. I never got into that stuff. I never could understand what they were saying to start with. I was raised in a more innocent time, I guess, what they call the soft rock, easy listening back in the 50s and the 60s. I hear them now. I knew of a young man that pulled up, had all of his windows down, had rap music banging out. I mean, had these what they call them, subwoofers and all this stuff. He was banging that stuff out. He pulled up down here years ago at a store right down here, about where Ingalls is in that area. And he left his motor running, and he left that thing going. He got out and went to the store. I don't know if you remember, in front of that area, they used to have a little sagebrush area there. Roots and brush. It wasn't all paved at that time. Some old fella just walked over there, got in his car, rolled all his windows up, turned the noise off, turned the motor off, locked the car, and threw his keys over to the bushes. I don't know how long it took him to get back to the house again, but I promise you, he didn't leave his motor running and his windows down anymore and leave his music going. Now, Satan has used that in churches. I know somebody right now, not mention them, I am so disappointed in how the direction they went. And they don't even live in this state. They live way away from here. But they've got these rock bands that just about look like Kiss, Kings and Satan's Service and all this, beating and banging for their, and it's not this, whatever they got down Greenwood thing going on. I mean, this is one of these ecumenical churches they've got out there. And friend, let me tell you, their music is born out of hell. He was a musical, a beautiful, very attractive, and he was also musical. 2, he was created with power. In Psalms 133, verse number 20, said, Bless the Lord, ye his angels that excel in strength, that do his commandments, hearkening unto the voice of his word. Angels have tremendous power. They have the power of heavenly beings to move from one place to the other without having to walk around much. They have power to do a lot of things. Don't want to get into that satanic power tonight, but I want you to understand our adversary, the devil, that walketh about the roaring lion, seeking whom may devour. Listen, he's a very powerful adversary. Over in 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, he said this, "And to you who are troubled, rest with us, when the Lord Jesus shall be revealed from heaven with his mighty angels." 2 Kings said, "And it came to pass that night that the angel of the Lord went out, smote the camp of the Assyrians." Now this is one angel. He killed 185,000. And 180, that's 80 and 5,000, 185,000. When they arose early in the morning, behold, they were all dead corpses. I like what one man said at the mill one time years ago. He came into the mill and he said, my brother went to bed last night and this morning he woke up dead. Notice the terminology that the Bible uses here. And when they arose early in the morning, behold, they were all dead corpses. Then he was created with permanence. In Luke chapter number 20, he said it this way, "But they which shall be accounted worthy to obtain the world, and the resurrection from the dead, neither marry nor are given in marriage, neither can they die any more, for they are equal unto the angels, and are the children of God, being the children of the resurrection." These angels are created beings, but they are also eternal beings. These angels in heaven continue right on as they have from the beginning. They have no lifespan. They don't get old. They are continually in the same state. They do not have the body we'll have when we get to heaven, but they do have what we would call an eternal body. One that never gets tired. You can't wear one out. Hey, listen, you can't outdo Satan because he can outlast you. And then he was created with purpose. Over in Ezekiel 28, the Bible said, "Thou art the anointed cherub that covereth." I put a little parentheses in here. The word anointed means consecration or set apart for purpose or a sacred use. So he was the anointed cherub that covereth. That word covereth means to lay over the hedge or to screen. Now, let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. What were cherubims? They were defenders of the holiness of God. What made Satan, what he did so bad was he was to defend the holiness of God. You remember when they built the holy place and then the Holy of Holies? Well, they had cherubims all over. They had them out in the holy place with their wings out touching each other and touching the walls. When you looked at the veil was interwoven with cherubims on them. When you went into the holiest of all, when you looked at the mercy seat on top of the Ark of the Covenant, there were cherubims that leaned and bowed over that and touched their wings over the top of the mercy seat. They were defenders of the holiness of God. He said, "I have set thee so, thou wast upon the holy mountain of God, thou hast walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire." In Genesis 3:24, the Bible said, "So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubims, and a flaming sword which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life." In Exodus chapter 20, he talks about those cherubims in the holy place. "The cherubims shall stretch forth their wings on high, covering the mercy seat with their wings. Their faces shall look one to another. Toward the mercy seat shall the faces of the cherubims be." So he was an angel that was created with just one distinct purpose in mind. You've got seraphims, you've got cherubims, you've got different types of angels in heaven. You have ones that are messengers, such as Gabriel. You've got one archangel, who is Michael. You've got all types of angels. We find in the book of Revelation that they're created for different purposes. You go back all through the book of 2 Peter, he talks about these angels that have purpose. So he was with purpose. Lucifer, or light bearer, means the shining one or to flash forth. to usher in the sun in the morning. He rose the morning up. He was musical. I've already dealt with that. Got ahead of myself. Ezekiel 28. He talked about the workmanship of thy tabrets and of thy pipes was prepared indeed they was created. Now, he was also created with privilege. He had access at all times to the throne of God. Now, I want to say tonight, he still has access to the throne of God. One is the accuser of the brethren. He accuses us day and night before the Father. That's what the Bible said. He accuses us day and night before God. You go to the book of Job again, chapter number 1. The sons of God came before God. Satan came with them. So he still has that access, but he had access to the throne of God. He told him that you're the anointed cherub that covereth, I have set thee so. So thou wast upon the holy mountain of God, thou hast walked up and down the midst of the stones of fire. He still has that. He had access to the garden of God. We dealt with that a moment ago, but back in verse number 28, listen, he walked in that garden. How long Adam was there before the fall, we have no way of knowing. I personally do not think it was that long. Knowing human nature and knowing how Satan works. Listen, Satan is a deceiver out of this world. He deceives people. He comes as a thing of great beauty. Boy, what a drawing power he has tonight for people. Satan's pride was his downfall. In Isaiah chapter number 14, the Bible said, for thou hast said in thine heart, you know, he was perfect until the day that iniquity was found in him. That iniquity was not in him in the day that he was created. Because the Bible said the angels were created as holy beings. They had no sin in them. They had an innocence in them. They had no sin. So something transpired that was a part of his will. Something that he chose to do that had an eternal consequence. That's what he's talking about here. For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend unto heaven, I'll exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. You go back to Psalms 48, great is the Lord and greatly to be praised. It goes on down and he talks about in the sides of the north, where the city of God is. So it's a reference to where God is. He said, and I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High, yet thou shalt be brought down to hell to the sides of the pit. We find the I wills of Satan. I just listed them. I will ascend to heaven. That's self-promotion. He's going to promote himself. Kind of what we would call in our day a coup. Sometimes you have military coups. Sometimes you have assassinations and people step in. He said, I will do that self-promotion. He said, I'll exalt my throne above the stars of God. That's self-exaltation. He said, I will sit upon the mountain of the congregation on the sides of the north. That's self-esteem. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. That's self-glorification. I will be like the Most High. That's the father of humanism. Oh, we have had humanism in our land for so many years now. I go back again, listen, I'm all for education, but I want to say that our education system in public schools, boy, they are rooted in humanism. One of the biggest enemies of our nation today is the Teachers Union of America. Very liberal, wicked, mostly women that have elevated. A lot of these women are sodomites. But they've been elevated to this position. That's what's keeping kids out of school right now. They'll educate illegal children without checking them for COVID face to face, but they won't let children come in and, hey, they control things out here. So what we find is the father of humanism is actually Satan. Now, what is his passion tonight? He hates you. Satan can't do a thing to God. He can't do a thing with God. He hates the people of God. He destroys everything that he can. I tell young preachers this, and boy, I don't have that problem here. But I tell these young pastors to protect their families, because sometimes when they get in churches and you've got a little thing going on a little side play in these churches, when they cannot get to the pastor, they'll hurt his family. I tell them, you protect them. I tell every young preacher, don't push your wife to the forefront. That's not her position. She's the wife of the pastor, not the pastor's wife. You understand? The pastor's wife becomes an elevation. The wife of the pastor means that she's my wife. And I tell them to protect their family and their children. He hates God's people, and he hates those that are still lost. One, he deceives the world. 2 Corinthians 11, for such are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into the apostles of Christ. You've got a lot of these TV, radio preachers and preachers in churches that are nothing but devils. That's all they are. They've called them stealing, they've called them lying, they've called them doing everything. And you know what? The people still flock after them. Apostles of Christ. For no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. Therefore it is no great thing if his ministers also be transformed as ministers of righteousness, whose end shall be according to their works. He's called the prince of the power of the air in Ephesians chapter number 2. Wherein in time past you walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air. He's called we find in Ephesians chapter number 6 that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickednesses in the high places. What are we battling in America today? We're battling satanic power. You've got a bunch of wicked, ungodly people that want to take this nation over. And they will take this nation to the ground. The second thing he wants to do is damn the lost. 2 Corinthians chapter number 4, but if our gospel be hid, it is hid to them that are lost, and whom the God of this world, and he is the God of this world, hath blinded the minds of them which believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine unto them. You've got the four souls in the first parable over in Matthew chapter number 13. You have the wayside hearer. And that seed is planted and it is stolen away. I've had that happen to people that I have tried to witness to, set up a time to be at their house, go to their house, and find out that some devil that I knew had gone and taken them someplace else, and I failed to get to witness to them. The devil will steal the seed, damn the lost. Then he defiles the saints. Boy, this is dangerous for us. Ephesians 6:16, above all, taking the shield of faith, wherewith ye shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked. Boy, do you know how much Satan shoots at your mind? He shoots at your mind. I preached a series years ago. I may go back and re-preach it. By the way, it's been about 33 and a half years ago when I preached it, so I figured most of them here don't remember it anyway. Somebody gave me a book called Dealing with the Devil. I don't know if any of you have ever seen that little booklet out. And whoever wrote this knew nothing at all about biblical theology. He may have had every good intention in the world. He talked about Satan reading your mind and Satan doing all this. Listen, he does not know what you're thinking. What he does is he interjects a thought and watches your reaction to it. He's very good. You ever watch people? You know, people who can lie with their eyes are good liars. Normally, I've set them up before I do something, and so I just ask a question, and when I ask that question, I look them right dead in the eye. And boy, you can see that flinch. It takes a real good liar. Did you know some liars can actually pass these lie detector tests? They couldn't. That's why these things are not permissible. Some people go to pieces every time you talk to them. That's why they're not permissible in court. They are not a good rule about if you're telling the truth or you're not telling the truth. It's according to how you're made. He defiles them by firing fiery darts, these darts of the wicked. When I would do good, Paul said, evil is present with me. What is that? An evil flesh that Satan attacks all the time. When you go over to that thorn in the flesh that he had, a lot of people thought it was his eyes. They said he had bad eyes, he had bad health. The Bible is very clear about what that was. He said it was a messenger of Satan to buffet him. That's an angel. That's a devil's what it was. He had a little he had a little devil that followed him around and aggravated him all the time. Now, I've got some ideas about what he aggravated him about. I believe it was his past. Even though he said, I did it ignorantly and in belief. You know, he said, I'm least of all the brethren because of what he had done. He persecuted the church of the living God and put God's people to death. You know, we read these in, and that's just speculation, but he tries to defile you every day of your life and then to destroy the disobedient. I want to end with this verse. To deliver such a one unto Satan for the destruction of the flesh, that the spirit may be saved in the day of the Lord Jesus. What is the end of sin? The end of unrepented sin is always dead. It's always dead. It ends up that way. What Satan does? I saw somebody in the newspaper and we got on our prayer list again. You know, it just broke my heart. I looked at them 2 or 3 times back in the paper again, and I thought to myself, you know, these are people that got moms and dads and brothers and sisters, and some of them got husbands and wives and kids and grandkids. Satan sets people up and it destroys. That's why I tell our young people, don't ever start anything you're going to have to stop. Don't dabble with anything. Don't fool with anything. Keep your mind clear. Keep your body pure. Take care of yourself. You say, well, I'm a social drinker. A social drinker don't work, man. There's no such thing as recreational marijuana. I believe all these things are stepping stones to a greater end down the road someplace. But we found Satan, and I didn't go through all of it. There's so much that we could deal with in the Bible. But I want you to understand, God created him in perfection, holiness, beauty. What a glorious, I believe he was probably the most glorious angel that God ever made. But God knew that glorious thing would turn into a great red dragon. And one day try to destroy everything that God has ever made. So we'll see a woman, that's Israel, to a child, that's Christ. And then you're going to see 3, that's Satan, play out in the end time. All right, we'll stand tonight and we're going to have an invitation.